Drifter and Sleeper forces continue their assault against Society of Conscious Thought shipyards, in an apparent attempt to either disrupt the distribution of the new Praxis battleship, or to acquire blueprints of the technology for themselves. These attacks take the form of waves of sleeper drone vessels, seemingly coordinated by a single drifter ship, often a cruiser bearing the Hypnos Tyrannos designation.
Capsuleers report that far heavier drifter assets have also been located in known space. Drifter hives, spatial rifts, and command battleships have all been identified at signal interruption facilities, believed to be serving as bases of operation for the attacks against Society facilities. How and why the drifters have relocated these heavy assets is unknown, but analysts suspect the use of massive Nexus spatial rifts to achieve the feat.
Commenting on these attacks, some drifter apologists have asked what the Society of Conscious Thought may have done in provocation. However, this latest drifter operation continues an apparent strategy of attempting to limit technological development by the New Eden cluster. Previous attacks against the Umar Empire, Sisters of Eve, and possibly even a Guristas fighter development program seem to indicate vigilant Tyrannos' efforts to punish developers of new technology. The Society has completed its planned distribution of proprietary ships despite these attacks. This is Elenari Roden
And Cyrillian Voth,
reporting in FDZ4 TAC A for the Discourse.
hello, good evening, and welcome. My name is Cyrillian Voth, and this is the second ever episode of the Crystal Ball. Hello, thank you for joining us. So normally Elenari, of course, is in charge around here, but today she is the ghost in the machine. She's in charge of all the pictures and is generally telling us what to do, but I will be greeting people and introducing people and generally asking dumb questions because I do not know what this is all about, and I'm hoping these guys are going to explain it for us. So joining me on the channel, apart from Elenari, who's going to be our silent witness, we also have the one and only nerd to end all nerds. This is the, they say that Eve players are to nerds what nerds are to normal people. Well, this is the man who is to Eve players what Eve players are to nerds, our very own and very beloved Makoto Priano.
Oh dear God, that's a possibly excessive introduction. I stand on the shoulders of giants. The dozens of people who have been poring over this stuff endlessly, day in and day out. I go to bed, I wake up, and then I find like 500 lines of a crash course in Slavic folklore happening in our Slack. It's madness, and I am but a mouthpiece.
Humble words from an amazing human being. And then joining us also, well, you see, tonight normally we would have Uriel. Uriel sadly couldn't be with us because real life hit him for wrecking damage. So see you soon, Uriel. But in place of Uriel, obviously we needed another lore nerd because we can't let Makoto do all the talking. I mean, we could, but we really don't want to. So we were thinking, what other lore person can we bring on board? And we hit the motherlode because with us tonight is a titan, if I can put it that way, of the Eve community, event manager, website creator, community organizer, the Barack Obama, if you will, of EVE Online, and possibly one of the nicest people ever to play this nasty, nasty game. It's none other than General Stargazer.
Hello there, everybody. I really must, if I ever run for like any political movement, or if I need like introducing into a room, I think I'm definitely going to employ you. I mean, it got to the point there where I thought you were going to burst out in Breaker of Chains for Makoto as well. It was fantastic. Hello everybody, I am General Stargazer, old person for Eve stuff, and here to serve you all.
Well, thank you for your service. And so we are still figuring stuff out and finding our feet, figuring out our style, and trying to work out what we're doing here. So all feedback is welcome. Also, of course, as always on the Crystal Ball, but always is it's only episode 2. But this is all about tinfoil, especially data mining. Our nerd friends have been digging through the data dumps and the logs from I don't even know where they get this stuff, but it's like not just Sissy, but all over the place. So this is very much spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, stop listening now. This is going to be lots of them. We are going to be talking about stuff that is upcoming, not stuff that's live on Tranquility now. So we are going to be speculating. Well, I'm not going to be speculating. These guys are going to be speculating. I'm just going to be listening and asking dumb questions. But as we speculate, we are very likely to get everything horribly, horribly wrong. So take everything we say with a very large bucket of salt. Now, we have talked about discussing things with the developers, but of course, Delegate Zero, when asked questions about these things, just likes to stroke his beard and say, well, what do you think? So we didn't do that. So today we are talking about a few different things. We're going to talk about the event with the Society and the Drifters. We're going to talk a little bit about Federation Day. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the... I've been saying Triglavian, but apparently that's wrong. It's got to be Triglavian, hasn't it? The Triglavian Collective and all the scary and strange things that they are up to. So here we go. First of all, the Society of Conscious Thought. Makoto, tell us something interesting.
So this is, of course, an event that's over. So many of you have seen it by this point, but despite the fact that it's over, there were some funky things that you may not have seen. Obviously, at this point, you all know and probably have your very own shiny Praxis battleship. It's slow as balls. It's flyable by anyone, very pretty, and so on and so forth. And you've got the Gnosis and the Sunessis, which were respectively ships that were handed out in the past. The Gnosis at the decade mark, the Sunessis, I think, when alpha clones became a thing. But getting into the juicy bit of this, the fun thing of the event is that the Drifters were, of course, not pleased about these ships being distributed and tried to disrupt it, and also, and by all appearances, were trying to get specifications for the technology, because you could, in fact, in some of the sites, get short-run blueprints for the Gnosis, the Sunessis, and the Apotheosis, the shuttle, if you destroyed Drifter battleships. And the funky thing there, of course, is that there were 3 sites, one of which is the one that everyone saw, which was the beacon site that had a cruiser that was sort of a pain to chase down and kill. And then there was a signature that you had to scan down that had a Drifter battleship that was, again, a giant pain to track down and basically required either a lot of time or multiple people to kill it in a timely fashion, not least of which because if you gave it too much time, it would just warp off and laugh at you. But there's a third site that not as many people saw that was an escalation from that scannable site. And this one had, of all things, a drifter hive in known space and multiple drifters, including a Tyrannos Polemos, basically a drifter general. So that's not the slightest bit spooky, having drifter hives and generals running around in known space.
Now, talking of the drifters fighting against the Society because of these ships, like, in terms of the ships themselves, there's no very obvious reason why they would care, is there? I mean, it's not like these spaceships can, like, own drifters, is it?
No, they really don't do that. I mean, they're fun. They're decent enough ships, but they're not amazing by any measure. And honestly, all of them would take it in the face if you tried to take it against an Apollo, an Artemis, a Yaconta, any of the non-event drifters. But the drifters have, on a number of occasions, attacked organizations when they've been developing or releasing technology. For instance, the New Player Experience is based around that same notion that the drifters are attacking the Sisters of Eve as they're developing alpha clone technology. Or likewise, they showed up when the Drifter autopsy was happening. I mean, it seems that the Drifters have a strong interest in any sort of technological advance, in either making sure they acquire it for themselves or restricting its flow and spread in some other organization. We don't really know because of how uncertain the Drifters' motivations are.
That was going to be my next question. Like, is there any speculation as to why they're trying to prevent the spread of new technology to Capsuleers?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Capsuleers are very much the enemy of the Drifters and possibly Sleepers. And the degree of relation between those two groups is an often changing and uncertain thing. So, I mean, if you think of sleeper space not necessarily as a mausoleum where the decrepit remains of the sleeper civilization are, but instead sort of a holding tank for clone bodies that the Drifters would like to use to make more Drifters, then we are competing with them for access to the resources in sleeper space. And, you know, anything that reduces the power of Capsuleers then improves their dominance in that space, in theory. Game mechanics allowing, of course.
Okay, now just before we move on from this, because I think you've covered that, what's this about an Alliance tournament sponsor? I assume that's the Society of Conscious Thought and not the Drifters.
Yeah, that one I checked in on the end. The Alliance tournament news was recently announced in terms of all the rules that were coming soon. And it was mentioned in there that this year's Alliance tournament sponsor is, in fact, the Society of Conscious Thought. What that's going to mean in terms of, obviously, in previous years, we've had themed ships, whereas obviously we've just been granted the Praxis battleship, so it's unlikely, perhaps, that they're going to reward ships for this year's Alliance tournament. But it was just an interesting note, nonetheless.
Wait. Are you saying that you think there won't be tournament ships for this year?
Well, I'm going to say that it's a possibility that there's... Well, I mean, like I said... The Praxis battleships just come out, so we've essentially just been rewarded with ships. So instead of, like, specifically the Alliance tournament winners being granted a ship, the whole entire cluster has been rewarded with a brand new ship. But who knows? There's nothing been said officially anywhere, as far as I'm aware, so who knows?
Hornin, sorry about that, I must step in. CCP Fozzie had said that they don't necessarily want to do tournament ships rolling forward, and I'm assuming this is in part because of the technical debt that's developed anytime they create a new ship. But it could be, for instance, that either they're just going to like bombard people with Plex as their prizes, or they could, for instance, get like funky slot 5 and 6 Genelution implants. Like, imagine a Genelution Omega implant that fits with the 1s through 4s, etc.
Ooh.
The Society has access to all these sorts of wonderful other technologies, so even if it's not ships, I think it's still going to be somewhat rewarding.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would have to be something pretty special to replace the tournament ships, because those are like sort of, what are they, 100 billion each in value?
Yeah. They're invariably, the ship's rewards are normally ended up sometimes appearing in the next seasons of Alliance tournament, because it's very rare that you actually see them out in the field. They do go out in the field, and you do see them pop up occasionally on kill mails that, 100 billion or 200 billion-ist ship has been lost from the Alliance tournament. So I suppose in one way it stops that exclusivity of them only ever being seen in Alliance tournaments. That, you know, as I say, whatever reward that you're then given is more universally seen, perhaps.
So we do have a question from a Slack from someone who's indicated that they haven't really followed the AT closely. They're asking if it's common for there to be a lore tie-in, and for many years, any given year's Alliance tournament would be sponsored by some faction in EVE. Most recently, I want to say it was the Angels, and then before that the Garistas, or wait, no, it was Serpentis, then Angels, then Garistas, going backward chronologically. And so the prize ships would be, in theory, some like gold-plated, ridiculously OP version of that faction's ships.
Yeah, they were balanced very. They were very, very far apart from what the rest of the ships that you see in New Eden. That they were mostly for Alliance tournament basis, but some of them had, for example, funky ways of doing repairs. So, for example, you would be able to have a bonus to nossing while also having a bonus to the amount of repairing that you were doing. So you were basically sucking away the capacitor of one ship while repairing another, which was a funny little thing that came in. But yeah.
That was the Blood Raider Guardian equivalent, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, there's the Garista's Chameleon, which is basically you take a Gila, you strap a Blackbird to it, and then you give it a covert cloak.
Yeah, there's lots of scary ships out there. In terms of the lore tie-ins, yeah, it is just historically it's sponsored by a particular faction or a particular race, and I think it's a case of we've actually now, I think with this, officially gone through everyone that's considered a major faction, I should say. In terms of like the actual background reason for why, for example, the Alliance tournament has always taken place in Jovian space, I don't think has ever actually been explained.
Yeah, they usually link it to the lore, don't they? But not really have a story built up around it. Not like it's a story or developing lore, but just and by the way, this is happening too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so apparently, to reply to Curzon in the in Twitch chat, sounds like we can probably not expect a sort of Alliance tournament praxis that's actually good, but rather we're going to get some other cool thing that will be hopefully equally fabulous for someone to show off with. But yeah, no special ships apparently, which is an earthquake, but that's how they're going. Okay, so moving on to the next topic then. Federation Day. General, what can you tell us about... What is Federation Day? Is that some Galente nonsense?
Galente nonsense, wow. Okay, so like Federation Day is essentially what some would maybe consider like an Independence Day for the closest real-world comparison, for example. It was literally the day that the Federation was essentially formed. It's been something that's been celebrated in the game since, I think, around 2007, I want to say. Originally by a guy called Bruno Bonner. And then, so basically it started off as a celebration, essentially in the old system of Unia, AUNIA. It was an old trade system, basically what Do-Dixie has become today. It's just a trade hub system over in Galente space. But it started off purely as the fireworks of the day back in 2007 was amusingly battleships torpedoing each other. So you get the shockwave effects of the torpedoes going off was the old way of doing fireworks. But there was races during the day. There was a racetrack set up with a series of containers that ships would be able to race around. There was frigate 1v1, so there was all sorts that happened during the day. But essentially that's been carried on year after year after year after year. That celebration has continued. And again, it is happening this year, except that CCP Dragon has been nice enough to ask... he asked a couple of the guys in F-Cord, and then that's been translated over onto the forums now as wanting everybody's input for actually making it an event in the game now as well. So you have Federation Day as a day itself being celebrated, and then like what we've just recently had with the Drifter event, we will also have it as a live event in the game as well.
So this is switching from being a pure roleplay event, as it has been in years past, into an official like a seasonal thing, like the Blood Raiders for Halloween and all of that stuff.
Exactly. It was a case of there isn't really anything this time of the year, and this is an event, as I say, that's been going on for years and years and years, and it's now actually been being considered, I should say. It hasn't actually, I don't think, been completely formalized as a event to be happening for the summer.
Okay, now we've got some juicy details on this. Is this from the data mining, Makoto?
Yeah, so let me
Tell us
actually
what
see
you
it.
got.
Okay, I was going to check updates. I want to say that the Eve Updates website might actually have something about the event.
I'll have a quick look while you're...
Thank you. But yeah, so we've seen some things in the database. So clearly CCP is beginning preparations for their Federation Day event series. And it's a little bit funky. We don't have much indication exactly as to what their plan is. But in the first place, there are, I believe, 10 trinkets that have gone into the database, and my guess is that these are going to be interesting things dropped from sites that will, espouse the virtues of the Federation and show off that they're, a post-racial, ethnically tolerant and diverse state, and so on and so forth. But also the NPCs themselves were actually tagged as Galfed. Now, I'm not sure if that's because the event itself is Federation Day, or because the event sites are actually going to involve attacking the Federation in some capacity. Or,
Yes.
wow, way to fly that state flag.
Wow!
Yeah, no. But here's some funky things. So the NPCs are tagged as Galfed, but at the same time, there are skins in the database for Ruvenor's Bequest. There are Ghostbird skins, which tie in with the Kaldari. And then there are also skins like Luminaire Rising and Zenith, which are very pretty things, and those are actually available for a select number of ships for every race. So we have any number of options here. It could be like a false flag. It could be that, we're attacking someone who's been attacking some asset in the state. It could just be that these NPCs are tagged as Galfed, but they're going to be with either the UDI or a fringe Galente group that's called United Against Decadence and Impurity, UDI. Yeah, I know, right? Evidently they are a religious group following the Amar faith and believe that the Federation, well, I mean, you heard the name. But of course, it could also be that the NPCs end up being, for instance, Serpentis, and they're just tagged as Galfed in the database because of the event in the day. We don't really know.
So I did just check updates.eveonline.com. It doesn't actually list anything on there, but what I will add is on the message that we got from CCP Dragon is that the date that the event was being planned to run from would be from the 19th of June to the 3rd of July. But the other thing I was going to add to what Makoto was just saying there is one of the cool things I did notice from some of the NPCs is there are capitals and super capitals listed as NPCs in the database as well.
Ooh.
Yeah, isn't the boss listed, or rather isn't there a Nyx listed as like boss 4 or boss 3 or something?
Indeed there is.
Which implies at least 3 or 4 different event sites with different levels of bossiness depending on what the situation is.
I'm just completely making stuff up here, so tell me if this is nonsense, but if we're seeing capitals and super capitals and NPCs, that immediately makes me think, are we going into low sec? Like a level 5 mission?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it's impossible, given that the other thing that I would say that is also probably a consideration is that given that we've just seen escalation events occurring from this Drifter event, that it may also be an escalation event.
Or it could be a mix. I mean, it could be that, hey, there's one standard beacon that's everywhere. There's a second sort of more difficult beacon that's primarily low sec. Hey, then there's one with a capital in nullsec. All of these might so on. There are any number of ways that this can be structured, and if there's anything that we've learned from FanFest, it's that the fellows doing development work for the seasonal events, their production times have improved to such a point that they can do this degree of authoring, whereas before it was really much smaller and much more cut and paste.
I'm really glad to see that I've sparked a little flurry of Kaldari nationalism in Twitch chat. That's all to the good. Just before we move on to the next and biggest topic, final question, especially for Makoto. What are the odds that this will feature new information on the outcome of Arataka Research Consortium's lawsuit against federal intelligence?
So a few things on that. In the first place, so...
Oh, God.
Oh yes, you opened a can of worms, and it's a big one. They're wiggly.
Oh, my God, there are worms everywhere.
Do I get to say objection, Your Honour, at any point? Or overruled?
Please God, no. So, first a thing, on the anniversary, actually the 10th anniversary of the Malklin incident was this last... Oh God, what was that? Tuesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah,
Tuesday?
no, it was Tuesday. So it was 15th May, 10 years ago, that a Nyx rammed into Malklin Station, killing Otaro Gariushi, the then CEO of Ishikone, one of the leading liberal corporations in the Kaldari state. Won't get too deep into the history because, we still have Triglavian stuff to cover, and there's so much of that. But anyway, on a day intended to celebrate that, run in conjunction with the Rata Enforcement Directive, ARC announced 2 new lawsuits against state organizations, actually, attempting to enforce compliance with Hope for All Act rules by Kalakyota, Hyasioda, and the Kaldari Navy regarding the weapons development program that resulted in the Kyonoke outbreak, embezzlement, and all the rest of that. So there's that. Secondly, there was
this was the more serious lawsuit.
I mean, these are all, Anyway, it's one of those things. It's like political knife fighting. Wait, using this day to sue other Kaldari megacorporations? What?
I have to say, have you ever heard of non-serious lawsuits? Is that actually a thing?
I mean, frivolous is a term that's tossed around.
This is true.
Yeah.
So let's get to good stuff. Tell us how you're suing the Galente.
Wow. Okay, so the Theo thing, the fun thing there is that it was acknowledged by CCP that shenanigans are ongoing. I tried to grill some people at FanFest, and the consistent response, and this was in fact word for word from several people, watch this space. And CCP has confirmed that multiple Galente citizen groups have joined the lawsuit. So, yeah, I know, right? So shenanigans are ongoing, and I think we've gently nudged CCP that the Kyonoke inquest wrap-up would be awesome, because, I mean, hey, we were promised, firing squads and that type of thing.
Yes.
Completely sounded a different person there. But yeah, so I don't think we'll get anything Kyonoke related necessarily with this event. I would, of course, love to see it, but, whatever CCP has in store, we'll be glad to see it. And honestly, if you do look up that thread with the recommendations for Federation Day, there were a bunch of great suggestions by Trethis Zafira, I believe, who is someone with an exhaustive knowledge of Galente lore, and yeah. So here's to hoping some of that's brought in, and we'll see what comes.
I was going to say, last thing before you do wrap up on Federation Day, the actual day, if those of you who are interested in celebrating it, is on the 23rd of June and will be at 1400 Eve time in the system of Luminaire.
Okay, so mark your calendars and set your waypoints, and if you're like me, then think about logging in maybe and show up for Federation Day, if only to throw tomatoes at someone. Okay, so now we are just about hitting the halfway point. Seems like the perfect time to hit the meat in our Lore Pastrami sandwich and talk about the Triglavian Collective. What's the Triglavian Collective?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll start with that. Okay, let's start with the simplest thing. They are a new faction that is going to be entering, at least the gameplay world of EVE Online in 8 days? Right? 8 days?
Yep.
Yeah, and they are a new big bad, sort of. At the very least, they're most certainly not going to be friendly, at least not at first. The implication is that they are a collection of post-human types who have been isolated, more or less, sort of, in a way, for possibly a millennia, possibly more. And shenanigans have been ongoing. There are some weirdly collectivist mind state types of things going on, and they have lots of black magic-y, occultic, Slavic things going on.
Okay, so I have a lot of extremely basic and stupid questions whose answers you may not actually know, but I'm just going to run through them and tell me what's nonsense and what's known. Okay, so first question. Are they like sort of uploaded, disembodied AI post-human consciousnesses like sleepers, or are they still human beings with human bodies?
So they've been confirmed to still be human, and well, human-ish.
But post-human, like
yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm asking. Like human, like the sleepers, but in a computer, or human like the Jove, like with bodies and stuff.
Definitely more like the Jove. We're going to be able to get Triglavian survival suits, so we're going to be able to get like funky, clothing. And actually, it looks pretty cool. I don't think we necessarily have a shot of it. I don't think it's necessarily even actually finished on Singularity, though definitely I do recommend everyone check out the Hobo Leaks website and try to pull up all the various items and have a look for yourself, because there are some pretty cool things there.
Yeah, so one of the things that was mentioned during FanFest explaining about them is essentially they are individuals that have survived in a massively harsh environment and use this multiplasmid technology, which we'll get onto in a little bit later, to essentially modify the biomes and ways to survive. So they are very much biologically based, should we say.
Though, of course, we're still not sure if individual is a term that could necessarily be strongly used for them.
True. But
did you say multiplasmids, or do you mean mutaplasmids, or are they different things?
Mutaplasmids, sorry, yes.
Right.
But there are multiple mutaplasmids.
Multiple, good. Okay, that's one to practice saying. Multiple mutaplasmids.
Yes, there you go. Tongue twister for you.
We'll have to string another couple of words onto that, but yes.
And I mean, okay, next dumb question. Do they simply live in abyssal dead space, or do they have some other civilization somewhere else?
Good question. I think the implication is that they are, at least so far as we know, mostly or almost entirely in abyssal dead space. The exacts of why, it's not yet known. My personal headcanon, which I'm sure will be terribly, terribly wrong the moment we learn anything about them, is that they're perhaps like a Jovian splinter group from the Second Empire that retreated to abyssal dead space to escape factionalism and the Jovian disease. Would be my guess, but I don't know.
One of the other interesting things is, as is just kind of flicked by on the stream, when you go through abyssal dead space, there are planets in some of the dead space pockets as well. So whether I don't think it was established at FanFest whether it was a case of these colonies were planet-side or whether they were living on some of these like basically planet-sized asteroids that also appeared in some of the abyssal sites. We know that obviously one of the thing that you essentially kill to loot the items is actually located in each of the pockets in space, but the colonies as to where the individuals would live as part of the collective I don't think was really established exactly where they live, but as I say, it's a little bit spooky to the fact that there is planets in some of these pockets.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily know where these pockets are. That's very specifically not noted. I just had an idea, and this is, of course, just totally throwing it out there. Is it Jaret that has the dead storms around planets?
You mean like the Hyperbole Nexus type stuff?
So the implication is that there are nasty space-time effects around certain planets in, I think it's Jaret, which was noted as the furthest edge of the Jovian Empire. I think, I can't recall if it was first or second. Implication, of course, being that it was a place that had been colonized and then shenanigans in the form of internecine violence, as happens with the Jove.
Now, talk about planets in these spaces. That rather implies that when you go into abyssal dead space, from K-Space that you're not just going into a pocket in that same solar system, but you're actually going like to a different region of space altogether. Like you're going through a wormhole or something.
So when, again, this is to be taken with a bit of a pinch, but when we first went on to Sissy and we went into abyssal bed space, the
Bed space? Is it bed space now?
Abyssal bed space, yeah. It's definitely, yeah. Go there for a sleep. Anyway, totally a thing. You go there, and the names of the actual systems themselves, whereas most of the systems that you get in Eve are obviously numerically or actually alphabetically named, the ones in Abyssal Dead Space are actually already in Triglavian, the language, the triangular language. So you can't actually, well, you can decipher it, so you can see what system that you're technically in Triglavian. But from my experience, so the first time I went on, you could actually just right-click the triangular name and paste it into chat, and it actually translated it directly, but they've stopped that from happening now. But for each, so there's 5 different types of environmental effect, and each one of those 5 different, at tier 1 level, each one of those 5 different effects that I encountered was a different system name. When I went to a tier 2 version of that same type, it also gave me, again, a different system name. But upon re-entering the same, for example, a tier 1 darkness effect, it gave me the same system name over and over and over. So I don't know if it's a case of essentially you're placed into the same system in different areas, or it's actually you're given a different pocket each time. So what you encountered last time, you may not encounter the next time you go in. But by the looks of it, it may be the same system that you appear in.
Okay, and last stupid question before we get to the stuff we actually do know. What are the names of these systems, and like, what are they called? Do you remember? You haven't written down?
I don't have them written down. I will find out for them, and I will get them added to the notes afterwards.
Yeah, I want to say that they were usually just sort of like strings of letters. I
was going to say so of the 5 systems, one thing I can tell you, of the 5 systems, 4 of them were actually pronounceable words and names to me. The 5th one, I'd say, was, given the general naming convention around the Triglavian stuff, I wouldn't say that it kind of fit with that. So I wouldn't say that it was not impossible that it was an actual name. It's just one that I couldn't say for the last one. But when I went back and rewatched the videos, it was a case of, yes, I could say the names of the 4 of the systems, but I couldn't say the name of the 5th one.
Okay, so they're not random names. They are definitely names of systems that have names that you could pronounce and say like a word.
Yes.
Okay, and do take a look at that while Makoto tells us about Triglavian spaceships.
Well, so honestly, there's not much that we can tell people that they won't necessarily be able to get from the details from FanFest. Much of it has been covered there. The important things to note, the Demovic, the frigate, is evidently produced by the Peronclade. The Vedmak, the cruiser, is produced by Svarog, I believe, and the Leshak is produced by the Velisclade. And we actually saw the triangles on the fully skinned version of the ship. One of our eagle-eyed lore nerds gave it a find elsewhere, saw that there was something there, went enhance, and then proceeded to just basically go to town attempting to decipher very fuzzy triangles from the side of a ship. And so the important things to note, as you all know, they fit entropic disruptors, which are single weapons that scale up massively in damage. They're armor focused, they're very pretty, they have massive singularities, sort of bolted onto the front, from which they evidently draw energy. And that's about the short run of it for the ships.
Massive singularities. Whoa, look at the Hawking radiation on that. Sorry, had to do that. Okay, so now you talk about Peronclade, Svarogclade, and Velisclade. Like, what's a clade? I mean, from high school biology, a clade. I actually had to. I confess, I looked this up. It's not from high school. Clade is like the species with a common ancestor, but it can't be that, right? Are we talking about tribes or something like that?
So you are absolutely right that it implies lineal descendants, and it's a sort of a branching of a biological tree, as it were. We see them used as sort of the not necessarily the topmost, but the second highest level of organization in the Triglavian Collective. And notably, the three clades that we see, which have actually more complete names that we'll get into later, Perun, Svarog, and Veles, are also the three god figures that assembled form Triglav, the three-headed god that rules over the heaven, earth, and the underworld.
So like a Russian Voltron?
Yes. Very Slavic, mildly Voltron. I want to say historically the mythological figures represent as three faces on one body with blindfolds over the eyes so that they can't witness sin or something like that. But what's interesting then is that you further into it get like subclades and troikas, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the terminology that's used in the descriptions for a lot of the things, but suffice it to say that it seems fractal threes all the way down, which is one of the reasons why when Stargazer was mentioning individuals, why I sort of piped up on that one, because we don't necessarily know how individualistic they are. The idea that they might in fact be bonded in triples sort of fractally is totally a thing, because some of these descriptions have, for instance, powers of 3 as their principal number, 3, 9, 27, 81, 729, and so on. And I skipped a power of 3 in there somewhere, I believe.
I'd just like to point out something as well, which I found quite amusing, is the fact that all the Triglavian stuff has been in, obviously, as you've pointed out, the powers of 3, yet there are only 5 abyssal types.
Hey, even they can't argue with physics.
So does that mean there's another 4 waiting to be found?
Well, yeah, I mean, CCP has indicated that if this feature takes off, they're certainly planning to expand it. It's indicated to be sort of a test bed for a new technology that they presumably want to use to revamp anomalies and PvE content in the game generally. But of course, there are a lot of technical barriers between here and there.
Okay, well, we've got tons still to discuss about these guys, so let's keep moving. Tell us about the alphabet. Now, this is the great work of ARC, isn't it? This is like the big mass project that you guys, I mean, it wasn't really me at all. I was just sort of a bystander. But all these nerds in Arataka Research Consortium spent ages working on this alphabet and figuring out what all the letters were and everything. What do we know about the alphabet and what it means in Triglavian language in the lore?
So it gets a bit funky. Initially, we didn't even necessarily know that it was a Triglavian alphabet at all. It was just weirdly triangular, and trinary and triangles and such do show up in a lot of other places. In fact, basically everything Jovian involves trinary at some level. So it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, this is a funky project. Basically, we're, doing decryption. I use that term loosely because it was, at its basic level, a character replacement cipher to identify the videos for blah, blah, blah. Basically, that whole event series involving the Drifter Death Balls and so on, won't rehash it here. But the funky thing is that in the first place, we now effectively have it confirmed that the alphabet is most certainly in use by the Triglavian Collective. It's on their ships, it's used as the description for the system names, and the really funky thing is that Jaret Victorian, producer for the Discourse and master of all things Slavic, found a funky little
He speaks Russian.
Yeah, he's Russian. Hey, Anyway, carrying on. He found this one guide that we'll hopefully be able to throw up on the screen that had some symbols that look remarkably like the Triglavian alphabet. And considering the recurring references to occultism and all of the Slavic mythology that's involved in this, was a fascinating thing to see.
And yeah, so what is that? I mean, like, what is the link? Do we have anything more than, gosh, that looks a bit like ancient Slavic runes, or like, is there a theory about what the connection is here?
Well, it's still a bit tenuous. I mean, we see the clades have their various names of Slavic gods. Triglav is, of course, also a Slavic godhead. But then we also see references to, like the Navka. Nav is a reference to souls in an underworld, and if I'm recalling what Jaret said correctly, it has implications of the souls of the murdered innocents, specifically referencing like women and children that have been murdered brutally. And also then religious communities and so on. So there's a recurring theme of sort of like this collective religious group, which, if you think about, like, people who possibly fled some great calamity to this most inhospitable space and is sort of surviving through this constant attrition and survival of the fittest, not merely in
dropping like flies.
Yeah, exactly. So, the survivors form this incredible kinship, and the whole experience ends up being quite spiritual in nature, I guess. I don't know. There's more to it than that, and that's not necessarily the most artful description of the thing, but we'll certainly get deeper into this once we start parsing the terms.
Okay, so moving on, we've got from the data mining, we've got information about some of the corporations in the database that are connected with Abyssal Dead Space. What can you tell us about those?
I'll quickly chime in on these ones. So on Sissy at the moment, whenever you enter Abyssal Dead Space at the moment, you every time you kill something, essentially you have a standing loss. The standing loss is allocated against a faction, and the faction at the moment on Singularity are 3 of the different Triglavian claves, as we mentioned earlier on. But you have I believe it's a standing loss against the actual faction itself rather than an individual corporation. And you also have, on some of these sites, you also have the sleeper drones, which are actually the rogue drones in there, which have also been allocated a faction, which are, I believe they're just Rogue Drone Corps, and is it Hive Minds is the alliance?
I'm not sure if there's necessarily an alliance, but there's certainly the corporations. The ones that are relevant here are the Navka Overminds, I think, and possibly the Unshackled Overminds, right?
Yeah, I'm actually on here. I'm just going to have a quick look.
Okay, and what are those things? I mean, speaking as someone who's not a rogue drone nerd, like, what?
So while Super's doing crash research here, so first on the rogue drone thing, so Navka, Nav, of course, is referencing, as said, the souls of the innocent slain. So the fact that you've got a friendly rogue drone corporation with a name something like, not necessarily undead, but, sort of like unfriendly spirit hive minds, is a funky thing. How exactly that all plays together is an uncertain thing. Does this mean like when a Triglavian Collective member, their physical body dies, do they shunt their mind into a rogue drone? I mean, that wouldn't be inconsistent with what we're seeing. It just seems sort of weird. But then again, the whole point is that this is very weird. On the subject of very weird, I actually just wanted to notice one thing for folks. If you're looking at the faction information for the Triglavian Collective, its headquarters are listed as New Eden, which is not the least little bit funky. And there is something that happens at... what is that? At the end of one of the Tony G books, I can't recall if it's Templar 1 or the Empyrean Age, where a Jovian ship attempts to navigate the New Eden Gate to get to somewhere. And the implication is that the New Eden, the gate, the spatial rift, isn't what people think it is. It's incredibly hostile to get through and naturally tears apart the ship. But, you know, this Jove completes his mission. Not that this is necessarily related. Doesn't necessarily mean that the Jove attempted to contact the Triglavian Collective to communicate something. But, you know, there's something there that is an interesting thing to poke at.
So, yes, the faction, amusingly also for the rogue drones, their headquarters is also New Eden, I should point out. But the rogue drones is the actual name of the faction now, the Alliance, and the member corporations are Unshackled Overminds, Navuka Overminds, the Sicilia Infestation, the Carabidis Infestation, and the Infested Regions Hive Minds. So there's 5 subgroups in it.
So
Does sound phenomenally terrifying.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if I may, Scylla and Charybdis, I think.
Yes.
They are Greek sea monsters on opposite shores, I think. So the only safe path is between them.
That's right. It's actually 2 real rocks in Greece. They're still there.
Yeah, and probably, you know, not any small number of biremes and triremes or whatever your galley of choice was ran into them.
Exactly.
So the description, amusingly, at the moment is codename Carabidis Infestation, Concord Security Classification, Omega Gold, Emergent Threat Rating, Case Red Gamma.
Yeah, Case Red Gamma is notably the Emergent Threats Investigation Group. Yeah, so and they're the ones principally concerned with the drifters and so on. So it's been said that the Triglavians might have some degree of power over the rogue drones or might be pulling them in. And there's actually more on that as we get into the descriptions themselves. So shall we push on?
Let's. Okay, so yeah, I mean, my God, there are worms within worms here. Yeah, so okay, construction materials.
Okay, so this is a fun one and pretty quick. There are a few things. The 0-point condensate is just noted as being used for powering of 0-point energy systems. So presumably the funky, evil singularity stuff, you know, who knows, they might actually be fueling their ships with Hawking radiation. We have no idea. But secondly, crystalline isogen 10. Isogen 5, of course, being the sort of unobtainium that powered Empress Jamil's superweapon and also is involved in the various events like Salin and so on and so forth. So it's sort of been one of those things that we haven't necessarily been able to play with, and now we're getting a more stable version of it. Hooray! And that about covers it for construction materials.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about the actual descriptions. Now, this is the descriptions for the structures and for the ships that are live on Singularity now. Yes?
Yeah, so they're definitely on Singularity, and these are supposed to be translations in word, if not necessarily in spirit, of the things found in like blueprints or on structures and so on. They're definitely strange, and they're absolutely the work of CCP Delegate Zero, considering love of occult and philosophy and so on. So let's dive in.
Remind me of James Joyce, actually, especially like James Joyce as half remembered by a person from Russia who doesn't use the or a.
Nice. Evidently, they also sound very similar to some writing by Finnish author Hannu Rajaniemi, I believe it is. That pronunciation is terrible. So not necessarily inspired by it, not necessarily something where you'll find connections there that will then inform your reading of the Triglavian Collective, but evidently there are factions that use that sort of weirdly stream of consciousness. But yeah, let's dive in. So the one on the Damavik, the cruiser, reads Damavik subclade of Perun clade revised adaptation schema for clade ship of 3 tactical troika classification has been accepted for imprinting in advancing time generations after cladistic glorification over Samovda subclade. Tactical subrole dispersal is in the gift of strategic troika. Partial translation of data included in recovered design schematics of the Damavik.
So I think you have to read that in a Russian accent, but I'll accept this.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't necessarily... Yeah, can't do that on short notice. But
I'll do the next one.
Oh, thank you. Wait, no, I'm worried now. But basically what it seems to say is that the ship was accepted for a building, and the question is cladistic glorification? Was there some sort of like ritual combat? Was some sort of trial? Were they in competition to design a ship? Or is it more that, you know, they... Yeah, who knows? Suffice to say that there are some weird things there. But on to the next.
Okay, here we go. Vedmak subclade of Spheroclade relinquished the adaptation schema of reverse time accepted 81 tactical troika classification into the clade flow of Triglav after cladistic mortification by Dashbog subclade. Strategic troika have advancing time pressure for adaptation into tactical subroles.
Okay, that was pretty good.
Some things in here do not react well to bullets.
Impressive. Okay, so basically it seems like the Vedmak subclade was forced to surrender the ship into the clade flow. The clade flow, we see this referenced a number of times, and the implication is that there's some sort of like thought flow or energy, or rather a data transfer system. The nature of it, whether it's like a direct mind-to-mind thing or whether it's just sort of a term they use for the progress of the community, is uncertain. But I sort of, considering that I continue to have this idea of the Triglav being nested fractally in 3s from top to bottom, like the clade flow would be sort of the progression of knowledge and consensus up the chain.
I noticed that they've both already now used the expression advancing time as if they're talking about the future, which makes me wonder whether the Triglavians have a weird way of thinking about the passage of time. Do they think of time in a linear way, or is it wibbly wobbly, timey wimey? Yeah, had to get that in there. Sorry.
Okay, well, that is an excellent question. Let's press on, because we see more instances of time stuff.
Okay, so I'll do the next one then, I guess. Leshak subclade of Velis clade scattered the adaptation schema of 729 tactical troika classification vessel into the clade flow without proving after a convocation of Triglav outside the struggle. Convocations of the commune troika have now time pressure for dispersal to strategic troika.
Okay, so we see now time pressure, reverse time, reclaimed adaptation schema. So the implication here seems to be that this is an old design that was forced back into production, presumably because the drifters are attacking. Convocation of Triglav outside the struggle, it sounds almost like it's, 19th century, writing about old communist meetings, basically.
I was going to say, what does troika actually mean? Does that mean just a committee of 3 people?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we sort of take the Triglav angle to it, at a certain point, it might be like a meeting of 3 minds that may or may not be directly connected as a troika. One person was noting that the easiest way and the smallest number with which you could have effective voting is 3. Because provided that each person votes up or down, yes or no, you will always end up with a supermajority at the end. And considering, of course, that the Jove are notoriously factional, that might be a way to force progress in the face of competing ideas.
Okay, so those are the descriptions from the 3 ships, and the Leshak, that's the battleship, right?
And that is.
So the Leshak then appears to be an older design, where the Demovic frigate is a newer one. Is that? Am I understanding this right?
That's the implication, I think. All of this is still a bit uncertain, and we don't necessarily know how their design process works and what's considered to be new or old. That's to say, like, old might just mean that it was something that they phased out a year ago because they found it was an inefficient use of resources, but oh hey, now we're fighting a war.
It's probably worth pointing out as well that as you've gone through each of those 3, that each of the 3 claves has made 1 ship each, basically, of each size, essentially.
Yeah, and also that the tactical troika, the number of essentially soldiers or souls aboard, in each case is a power of 3 and has increased each time.
Okay, so the next description is from structure, from the Triglavian Deviant Automata suppressor in the Abyssal Dead Space Pockets. Twitch chat is asking if I would do this in the Scottish-Russian accent, but I don't think I can pull off a full Sean Connery here, so I'm just going to carry on. Strategic troika of Sverok clades several descents from Noema that deviant automata may enter Subornost with clades. Sverok clade now time affirms imperative of Poshlost extirpation. Incomplete deciphering of data embedded in targeting processor of a Triglavian Deviant Automata suppressor.
I'd just like to point out that is an awesome name for a structure. Suppressing all deviants in abyssal space.
Well, the automated
Deviant
ones,
Automata.
which makes no comment on the rest of them. But that is... so, okay, there are a few terms that I'm going to try to define here quickly, and please do pipe up to correct me when I misstate some things. Noema is... the word is derived from Greek for thought, and the implication is some sort of element of intentionality. And it's specifically by a philosopher by the name of Husserl, I believe it is. Definitely worth some reading into. I'll admit that philosophy isn't necessarily my strong point, but the implication is that it's not just thinking, but it's doing, and it's sort of the interplay between the two things. And then, of course, may enter a subornost. So the term that I saw was something to the effect of a spiritual community for many jointly living people. So basically, like, enter like a commune or a communal situation with these people. So notably, sever descents also. I'm just going to touch on that briefly. It's not just saying no, it's disconnecting with the idea, which is a curious thing depending on how one reads the clade flow. But Poshlost extirpation, Poshlost, if I'm getting it right, is a Russian term for basically sort of like a negative human trait or habit. So basically it's an unhealthy thinking or doing. And extirpation is sort of a local extinction or a physical removal of a thing, like, removing diseased tissue or that type of thing. So basically, the implication here is extremely forceful, which is why the fact that Svarog disagrees so strongly on this and then is also putting out automata suppressors implies that, there are some strong disagreements on how exactly to proceed from here.
Okay, so moving on, we've got a couple more of these before we wrap it up. The next is another structure description, and here it goes. Paramount technical troika of Gromovi subclade evoked the playful communion of repeated time tactical troika in sub-27 exclave with repeated conduit loop construct 9. Upflow of metaxy to Peronclade evoked acceptable grounding of material realization in advancing time of tactical casting and reflection across arbitrary response units. approximate decryption of firmware stack and a parallel signal processor recovered from a Triglavian multi-body tracking pylon. Okay, so what is a multi-body tracking pylon?
So that is something that improves the tracking and application of anything in its effect area. So basically, the implication here is... okay, let's see here. This one's actually sort of difficult to parse. Repeated time tactical troika, exclave, repeated conduit loop, upflow of metaxi to paranclade. So metaxi is sort of a middle ground, in between space, shared view of things. It's referenced in Plato's Symposium. The idea is basically that oral history, when you're sharing that history, people will interpret it differently, but there is that area where they agree, and the metaxi is the shared and agreed upon interpretation of things. So basically, upflow of metaxi implies basically the upflow of agreement or commonality. And it seems like basically this is basically saying that whatever this simulation is, or whatever this tool is, improves simulation or projection of how things are going to develop.
Gets everyone on the same page and everything on track.
Including guns.
So it's like a tracking system.
Exactly.
Okay.
You'd see the tie-in.
So then, following on with the last one, before I read the description, what is a command pylon? An automata command pylon? Is that the thing that lets you take control of the rogue drones?
Sort of. So this one is rather different from the suppressor in that it boosts the hostile rogue drones and debuffs player drones. So it's sort of yes, this one is our friendly drone structure, as opposed to the Svarog one that's sort of like kill all drones.
Wait, so from the point of view of the player, of the capsuleer coming into the pocket, the command pylon is a hostile structure?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it debuffs your drones and boosts theirs, so it's...
Got it.
Yeah.
So here's the description. Yeah.
Quickly chuck in as well. Every pylon has a particular range, so they're weak ranges or strong ranges. So there's, even though it may be buffing them, it may be a case of if you move out of range of them, for example. It's the same for all of the pylons. So if you have actually bad tracking, for example, if you're actually in range of the tracking pylon, it's going to make you better as well as them track better. But in the case of this, it's a case of get out of range of it because it's going to mean bad things for you. But sorry, carry on.
Okay, so here we go. Convocation of the Troika of the Vodkia subclave of Velisclade, divined purpose for the deviant automata in the flow of Virage. The Koshoi of Vodia made a casting that the winnowing of the clades would be served by turning Poshlost to Subornost. The Navka of Vodgia gave this noem a profound reverse-time sense and grounded the metaxi. The Narodnya of Yodia accepted the volition and merge consented in the Koshoi and Navka of Troika Vodia. The describing is the working of the flow revealed as law. Partial translation of markings found on a Triglavian automata command pylon. Okay, oh my god, that's really hard to say.
Yeah, this is easily the densest of them. So here, this gives us a little bit more of a view into things than some of the other.
It sounds like a legislative process. It sounds like they had a debate and voted on things and eventually reached a conclusion that this was how it was going to be, and revealed as law at the end.
Yeah, so, okay, we've already covered Noema, we've already covered some of these terms. Virage is evidently sort of like... I can't recall if it's necessarily an underworld or an afterlife, but it's... actually, wait, no, that's exactly what it is. It's where birds fly for the winter and souls go after death. So that's what the Triglavian Collective might be calling the Abyss, is Virage. It's where birds fly for winter and souls go after death. But the funky things, so we've got three organizations, it seems like. Koshoi, Navka, Narodnia, and these are all of the Vodia. And this is a convocation of the Troika. So the Troika includes the Koshoi, which is evidently some sort of antagonist, and evidently in Slavic folklore, commonly someone who will abduct the hero's wife, is what I saw, which is sort of hilarious, but basically not a friendly person. The Navka...
It's traditional.
Hey, yeah. The Navka are, of course, the souls of the slaughtered innocents, and the Narodnia evidently are sort of like the peoples. So
Right, it's like nations, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of. But so here's the thing: we've got this sort of voting. So what it seems like is maybe made a casting is sort of like posited that this might be the case, that the antagonist, throughout this concept that was not necessarily commonly accepted, and then the Navka, the souls of the dead, which might actually just mean infomorphs of people that have died. It might mean that the souls of the dead continue to live for the Triglavian Collective. Gave some grounding in past experience, hence, gave this Noema profound reverse time sense and grounded the metaxy, the middle ground. And then the people accepted the volition and merge consented as opposed to sever dissented, with the Koshoi, the antagonist, and the souls of the dead.
With all this talk of sever and merge makes me think of Git.
Of the hub variety?
Yes, GitHub, community as software, or software as community. ...
Well, let's just hope everyone closes their symbols.
The way I ended up looking at it for the pylons personally, anyway, was it was like one clave decided that the use, for example, of any drones was going to be a big no-no. Whereas the like other side of it had ended up deciding, well, yes, we will use them, and that's why you've ended up like amplifying the effects that they have on the sleepers in that pylon's range, for example. And there's you have the third faction of, can't we all just get along?
Well, sort of. Though at the same time, we see this use of the term Navka with as part of the troika of the Vodia subclade, and then we also have Navka overminds. So, I mean, what does that mean? Does this, is this just happenstance, or is there some element of the rogue drones being suborned by the souls of the slaughtered innocents?
I get the strong impression that we're being given tiny glimpses of what's meant to be a very complex history with with a complex society with factions and divisions and conflicts, and it's not although they're described as a collective with a sort of a strong communalist sort of sense of community and a lack of individuation. On the other hand, we're given a strong impression that this is not a unity, but rather a very human, sort of messy kind of political society.
Shall I quickly read the Navka Corporation description for you?
Tell us.
The Navka overminds are a form of rogue drone swarm that can be encountered in significant numbers throughout abyssal dead space wherever Triglavian infrastructure is present. The designation Navka seems to have some relationship to a subdivision of the Triglavian race that run across the so-called clades. It would seem that the Navka overminds are either entirely suborned to the Triglavian purposes, or perhaps more worryingly, are willing to work with them. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, dare say, Sierra, that you're absolutely, or real, depending, that you are absolutely right that we're getting the initial glimpses into a new faction that has quite a bit of writing on it, and without a doubt, they are not necessarily fractious, but there's a lot going on there, and I would not be surprised if CCP, and specifically CCP Delegate Zero, if they have more stuff in store for us that we won't necessarily see until, and possibly well after, this goes live.
It's like a whole new Jove.
You have to break into song for that one, but don't take that as advice, please, God, no.
I'll hold it in just for now. Speaking of which, it's pretty much time. We've already run over our usual allotted hour, so poor Ellie is making signals that we should finish. So, as is Mrs. Voth for that matter. So let's wrap it up. Makoto, final thoughts? Any shout-outs?
I think I let in with a pretty hefty shout out for ARC, but as always, folks, all props should go to the monstrous and masterful hive mind of nerds that we've gathered together. And for those of you who are interested in joining us in all our various shenanigans, the in-game channel Consortium Operations, check it out. Possibly join us on a fleet, and just chat with us. Failing that, the Tweet Fleet Slack lore channel is a good place to tinfoil about these types of things. That way we've got some stuff that we can shoot back and forth, even when we're out of Eve. So both absolutely good places, and looking forward to hanging out with you all and going over the piles of lore.
General, any shout-outs or final thoughts?
I am just really looking forward to getting into some Abyssal Dead Space. I've been using it a lot on Singularity, so I've had some good fun with learning it. Funny statistic I will quickly end with is apparently there's roughly about a 50% chance of survival for the few thousand that have gone in and tested it so far, so there is no guarantee of ever entering and exiting alive, so I'm quite looking forward to actually fully experiencing it on Tranquility. As for shoutouts, Makoto pretty much covered all that I could think of. The only additional one that I would chuck in is for one of my additional colleagues over in F-Court that brought the Federation Day communication from CCP Dragon onto the forums for the community to chime in on, which was Commander 89. So thank you very much to you, sir.
Okay, well, I've got a couple of little things. First of all, a mini shout out to CCP Delegate Zero, who, if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting him at FanFest or one of these other events, then he's the one with the really snuggly beard. It's just the kind of beard that makes you want to curl up somewhere in his beard and go to sleep, like a forest creature. And he's a really sweet, sweet guy, and has one of those slightly scary evil brains. He is obviously the brain behind a lot of this lore, although he's not been alone, of course, in working on it. And, a lot of the knottiest, gnarliest, freakiest stuff in Eve lore has one time or another come from him. So thank you for giving us all some stuff to puzzle about and scratch our respective chins over. Also, a little shout out to Jaret, who wasn't able to be with us tonight. We were very much hoping for his Slavic wisdoms and linguistic insights, because of course he is a bit of a linguist when he's not making these amazing videos. The man is a machine, and I am always in awe of the guy for all this output, which is just phenomenal, as many of you know. And finally, a big thank you to Ellie, who has of course been silent tonight, but has very much been present, organising everything and running the pictures that we've been enjoying, and generally making sure the show stayed on the road, because I'm a bit random like that and need Ellie to keep me organised. I am, of course, the cat, as I mentioned before to her Blofeld, so thank you, Blofeld, for stroking me so nicely. Oh, wait, that came out wrong.
Oh, my. Oh, my. Oh, my.
Oh, jeez. Oh, I can't believe I just said that. I'm so sorry. Anyway, you know what I mean. Yeah, the thought was good. The thought was good. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, God. So quick with that before I say something more stupid. Thank you all very, very, very much for joining us tonight. And thank you for being in Twitch. Thank you for all the people in Twitch chat for popping up with questions and thoughts and jokes and embarrassing jokes a couple of times. That's always nice. Nice to see some familiar faces in there. Hello, Dorian. Huge thanks to everyone listening, and a huge thanks to all the ARC team and everyone behind the scenes who makes these productions possible. Have a great evening, and we will see you again before very long. Fly safe, fly interesting.